UK Motor Talk.
Well, hi everyone, we are back again. I'm Mike.
I'm Graham, in the absence of Jim, possibly. He may follow.
I'm Jim. I just thought I'd let age go before beauty.
Jolly kindly.
We are UK Motor Talk, or at least some of us. Unfortunately, David can't be with us this evening. What have we been up to, guys? I know what you've been up to, Jim.
Well, we've done a track day, haven't we? Recently, when did we do that? That was last Friday, wasn't it? And that was an afternoon out at Goodwood. Very civilised, but what a
was.
That's hilarious. That track, I love it. It's brilliant.
There's a few things I need to cover off to start here, and that is that yes, they are a bit more expensive than normal, but it's the first track day I've been to where they have someone hosting and offering you tea and coffee. And you have the use of the Jackie Stewart Pavilion
all day,
and then an incredible lunch, really very good. So some properly tasty sausage rolls, and they were very good, weren't they?
Yeah, I do need to visit the Goodwood shop at some point and buy about 3,482 of those to see me through the next year.
And some brie and red onion tartlets, and oh man, the food was really good. It took track daying up a notch, and you'd almost wonder whether they'd aim to try and keep the tracksuit and hoodie crowd out. Unfortunately for them, we turned up.
Well, I did turn up in a tracksuit, didn't I?
And I did turn up in a hoodie, partly because it was so cold, I had to wear every single item of clothing I owned. And in fact, it was so cold that halfway around the track, what happened?
It snowed.
It did. It snowed. Coming out of St Mary's and it's sleeting and then snowing sideways. I'm like, great, this is going to make it entertaining halfway around, isn't it?
Yeah, only sort of snowed for about 10 seconds, though, didn't it? And then, it rained every now and again.
For you,
but
maybe.
Again, only for about 10, 15 seconds. But the track stayed nice and bone dry all day, didn't it? So that was good.
Yes. It's an epic track, except for one big surprise, wasn't there? We were both in the car and all of a sudden it was... Pheasant!
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 And, well, actually, no, I think it was the same pheasant twice, wasn't it? He ruined
it was the
two
same
of my
pheasant
laps,
twice.
that pheasant. And then on the cool down lap, he was just sat there on the infield in the grass staring at me as if to say, ha ha.
Little pheasanty... Insert word here. Yes.
Beep.
So they didn't keep the peasants out, and they certainly didn't keep the pheasants out either. So there we were at Goodwood. If you want to see a bit more of that, incidentally, have a look at our YouTube channel, because we will chuck something up there in due course about our day at Goodwood and some of the things that we saw there as well, because there was some quite interesting machinery there, wasn't there?
Yeah, I've just about finished editing the videos that we shot on the cameras in the car, so there'll be a couple of those going up on YouTube.
And I have some of the stuff from outside the car, including a number of cars that we saw there. One guy really did surprise me, though. First track day, had driven from Hertford down to come and have a go around in his Audi A4 B7 2-litre petrol estate, which was just completely random, just a road car with some fancy-looking brakes on it. Yeah, fair play to the bloke. He'd never done anything like it before in his life and decided, why not?
Yeah, just sort of turned up in corduroy slacks, barber jacket and a scarf, and his missus was just sat in the passenger seat, I think reading a book whilst they were queuing up, waiting to go out into the pit lane. It was, just a complete change of normal pace, to be fair, wasn't it? But there was a really good mix of cars there as usual. There was a lot of racy-looking MR2s out in the morning.
Yes,
they thinned out as the day went on. There was John from Forensics Detailing Channel fame on YouTube. He was there in his BMW M4, looking rather shiny, looking a bit less shiny by the end of the day. It was covered in many bugs and bits of dirt and bits and pieces, but he looked like he was having fun. Really nice bloke to chat to as well, really, really friendly. But that was just the general vibe, wasn't it? Everybody was just in a really good mood and having a really good time.
Yeah, it's an interesting format, really, Goodwood, because you spend a lot of time in the car queuing up. You queue up to get into the pits, and then you queue in the pits to go out. So, although they'd said you get 3 15-minute sessions, that's not quite how it works out, is it? You just queue up as many times as you like. And if you have any designs on going back out again, you might as well just queue up again.
Yeah, I think so. We got, and if if you've parked up and then run out to the loo or go and do whatever you've gone to do, if the queue sets off, then people just go round you, so you don't actually lose your place in the queue, so to speak.
No.
But it was, I think we ended up getting 4 runs. Did we get 4 or 5 runs in? It was 5 runs, wasn't it? But we could have had one
5.
more, to be fair. Yeah, we got 5. Could have had one more, but we managed to use an entire tank of fuel in an afternoon, which is quite thirsty for the mighty Fiesta, isn't it? I think it's because approximately 98% of the lap is at full throttle, with a couple of heavy braking events, and that's it. But it's a bloody quick track in places, isn't it?
It's a very, very quick circuit. One of the in its day, one of the fastest, I think, in the country. I've been around there a number of times over the years, and sat alongside some pretty impressive drivers over the years.
Clang alert.
Yeah, well, why not? I've done.
Go on,
these
drop
things
some
where
names,
you should
Graham.
talk
Drop
about
us some
them.
names. Go on.
Well, okay, all right. Derek Bell going into the final corner before the chicane, saying, "Oh, I think the brakes may have gone." Well,
Awesome.
they hadn't, but I mean, these guys are all so experienced at what they do, which is why I love going around with them. They're all completely laconic about the whole thing. They've seen this, they've done this over so many years. They just get faster and faster and faster. Probably my nemesis was Johnny Herbert in the D-Type from 57 Le Mans.
Wow, that's cool.
I went out in an open-face helmet with shades on. It was a very, very bright day, and ended up looking like Biffo when I came back in because I had 2 black eyes. And Johnny Herbert got a bollocking from the marshal. Said you weren't supposed to go out there with any passenger without a full face helmet. Well, It gave everybody a chuckle.
Well, I think we probably got up to about 110. That's kind of the speed we were doing. So not huge speed, but huge enough for our little Fiesta. And unquestionably, we had a lot more commitment than some of the other guys on track. There was a 911 GT2 out there.
Quick.
On the straight, but definitely being careful through the corners, because you lapped him, Jim, didn't you? And I certainly passed him a couple of times through the course of the day.
Yeah, I did. Well, he was behind me in that run because I was the front of the queue for the one run that I did. So he must have been behind me when we all set off. And I did manage to catch him up and overtake him. So yeah, I know it's a track day and there's no prizes for lap times or number of laps completed or anything like that, but I was quite chuffed to have got round an extra lap in the time it took him to do however many laps we did in that session.
There is with any day like that though, there's a huge diversity of experience, and some guys who just along for a bit of fun, and others who just take it a little bit more seriously and have the machinery to do so.
It was a good learning curve. The first lap out or the first run out that we did was, but we'd watched a few videos, haven't we, and a few circuit guides. But of course, until you get there and actually get in the car, it looks quite a bit different, and it's a very different thing when you're doing it. And we'd fitted new brakes to the car a week before, so I was still sort of I'd done some mileage to try and bed them in, but the first run was still just bedding them in that little bit more, I think. But they were certainly well bedded in by the end of the day, judging by the amount of brake dust that was all over the wheels.
We've had a bit of an upgrade actually in that regard. So we're running standard discs as the race guys do, but Mintex race pads, and we've also fitted ducting. So from behind where the fog lamps used to go, there's now a 3D printed mount with hoses that go through to a mount which we made ourselves. And had welded together. Yeah,
You say made it. We bought the bits and then showed the technician in the workshop what we wanted to look like after he'd finished welding it, if you didn't mind awfully, please. And he did it. It's always handy to know somebody who can weld.
To be fair, we cut everything down and we ground it, made it all fit, and now it ducts the air directly behind the back of the discs, and it seems to have done the job. I say it seems to have done the job. We also fitted a power steering cooler because that kept overheating and bubbling up all over the place. Truth be told, it was 2 degrees, so we have no idea really whether it worked or not, but it was fine when it was 2 degrees outside and snowing.
Well, after a run, you could go back, you could lift the bonnet and just quite happily hold the power steering bottle for the first time in a long time. In fact, if you had a cup of tea served to you that temperature, you'd want to gulp it down a bit quick. So it's either really effective or, when it's snowing, that helps keep things cool as well. But everything ran well, apart from a slightly concerning noise from the driver's side rear. which we're not quite sure what it is yet, so we'll have to go and investigate that.
And this time, I think I might have broken it. In a turn up for the books, this is unusual. There was some very hard braking going into, I think it was St Mary's. And I thought, this feels a little bit irregular at the back. And so it's almost like it's picked up a stone at the back. Or maybe the caliper's just broken now and it's just sticking a bit or something. I'm not entirely sure, but I think we're going to need to strip that down and have a look and see what's going on. Because it isn't quite right. But I went back to Goodwood the next day because I enjoyed myself so much and took the boy for one of the Say Well track days, which was superb fun. Just the lad and I, and we had a good old look round the cars and a peer through the windows and such. Wandered down onto the track, and he really enjoyed himself. Had a great time watching things fly around. But my goodness, some of the cars. Peter had his Senna out there, and as it went past, I just did a full-on Jesus as it just shot straight down past the tower. At goodness knows what speed. Goodness knows. It picks up so much pace, that thing. It must have been accelerating sort of 2 to R1, I reckon. It was very, very fast indeed. But excellent to see these things out on track being used. And raising some money for charity, of course. It's for the Snowdrop Trust this time around.
Yeah, he does get them all out on track regularly, doesn't he? And
he does.
As you say, although they all sit in garages or barns, etc., and he does pamper them and look after them and wander around and look at them of an evening with a glass of wine, I'm sure. At least they do actually get wheeled out, dusted off every now and again and thrashed round a track, which is superb.
But that's much less common these days. People that own cars of that nature are much less about lending them out for charity days and taking Joe Public for charity days and so on. And it was just a great pity. Well done, Peter, for doing that, and anybody else that does that.
We thought just for a chuckle, we could say to Peter, next track day out, shall we bring the Fiesta along and we'll take people out in that? Just for a giggle.
Well, we figured if it makes a £5 or a £10 a person or something, then that certainly adds up and it goes to great causes. I mean, he's had a number of track days for a number of courses, including Snowdrop. The local hospitals, for example, have all benefited from his giving. He's done a lot of philanthropic work, and you can only really applaud that, can't you? And if it's something that we all enjoy, it's in a shared interest, why not?
Well, I will quite happily wheel the Fiesta along and spend all day belting around for anybody who wants to put anything in a charity bucket. It sounds like a good day out to me.
Yes, you put £1 in your slot and you're anybody's for something like that, aren't you, really?
When it comes to things like that, yes.
Did Peter get his Zonda sorted after that little incident?
He did, and it was out on track.
Good.
So, yeah. The Zonda these days, Pagani Zondas, a couple of million, I should think, somewhere that sort of order.
Between 2 and 3.
Yeah. I mean, but what a thing! I think the mirrors are actually worth more than my car. Memory serves. I think they're about £7,000 a piece. It's a beautiful thing, and there's some electric stuff there as well, and that was absolutely flying round. A couple of Taycans that were just absolutely showing some of the petrol stuff. A clean pair of tyres. They really were just gone. And they have their own sound flying around. I wasn't really expecting to make any noise at all. But you do get an interesting sound out of them. It sounds like a whoosh of building pressure. Maybe that's what it is.
Yeah.
You do notice as it flies past.
Radio-controlled cars make a noise, don't they? So there's no reason an electric car shouldn't make a similar noise.
Yeah.
Talking of the Senna, Dave and I were sort of corresponding earlier. Both of us, quite by accident, caught the rerun of the Senna movie on one of the smaller channels, and I saw most of it. It was quite tragic what happened to him, but it's just, particularly we commented, both he and I, on the look on Adrian Newey's face and Frank Williams' face after the events, and I was saying if you read Adrian Newey's autobiography, he deals at some length with the being there and the ramifications of being there and the fact that they were both technically under arrest and the changes that had been made to the car that morning. So were untested, sadly. But the Senna film, I remember seeing Murray's coverage on the BBC and how carefully they cut away. But in the film, of course, it's I think it's Italian TV coverage, which is graphic in all of its details and Very
It's
sad,
horrific.
very sad day.
I was about 5, I think, or something similar when it happened. I'm sure it was what 93, was it?
4.
94.
94.
So
1st of May,
7.
94.
And the first time I'd seen it was watching that documentary, and it was a definite "I'm not crying, you're crying" moment watching that. You know, it is. You know what's coming. Actually, I say you know what's coming. I didn't really know what was coming because I hadn't seen it, because I deliberately not watched it, because I'd always thought it was so tragic. And there are so many drivers over the years, and thankfully not so much these days, that have had these horrific crashes and obviously not been able to survive them. Frankly, I mean, if you look at more recent crashes, Grosjean, for example, and there have been crashes obviously more recently than that, where you think, how the hell did someone get out of that? How is that even possible?
Mick Schumacher's crash recently,
Yeah,
absolutely
exactly.
very, very high speed crash.
Yeah.
Spectacular in terms of the car shedding bits, but after a brief pause to catch his breath, he was up and walking. It's quite astounding to me.
There's been so many developments. If you look at the likes of Jackie Stewart, people that have campaigned in many ways, certainly if they've been unpopular for doing so, for developing cars. If you look at the Halo, for example, there have been so many developments that have helped save so many drivers, and that I think we really should celebrate perhaps more than we do, because I know that's obviously dramatic when there's a crash or something similar, and you always want the guys to walk away, but you just think, thank God they have these things now. It's amazing that people have managed to have these kind of crashes and remained, they haven't, as entirely intact, for want of a better way of putting it, because these are incredible speeds, and I know that these guys are, the best drivers out there, but there will always be instances, things that you can't expect. A tyre falling off and bouncing over the front of the nose cone, anything like that.
Things like Verstappen and Hamilton's crash at Monza last year, where it landed on his head, and watching Drive to Survive, the episode where Toto's back in the factory looking at the car, and he said, hands up, honestly, I was very, very opposed to the Halo, and I argued against it, but thank God I lost that argument. Otherwise it would be a very different story. And I think we'd said in our little chat outside of this podcast, we'd said Sid Watkins would be watching all this and very, very happy that actually most weekends he'd have very, very little work to do. Turn up, you're all right, yep, okay, out you get, that's it, fine. That would be his job done, as far as
Sid did some
medical
brilliant
delegate
work.
would go.
I mean, the partnership between Sid and Jackie Stewart, and to a slightly lesser degree Ken Tyrrell, and certainly the support of Bernie, had changed everything for Formula One drivers. I always remember Sterling saying that he used to reckon he'd go to a funeral every other week.
It's astonishing.
It is astonishing. In the 50s and 60s. It's just, fatalities were so common.
But then if you go back to the 20s and 30s, pre-war race cars as well, I mean, by today's standards, maybe not so quick, but a hell of a lot more dangerous. We managed to stop and get some photos on the track in the same place that our company's founder had his car, and had a fantastic photo, which we've got up at work. And he sat there in a Talbot Lago Type 22S, I think it is, which is still racing today in historic series. And we put our little car there, and a small tin helmet is pretty much all he has. No belts, no nothing else. And you think, if it goes wrong, you'd be, if you're lucky, you might be flung from the car out of its way.
But that's what most of them hoped for. Most of them hoped or believed that they were safer without seatbelts. That the chances, their survival would be greater if they were thrown out. But I was rewatching just recently with my grandson the '55 Le Mans accident, and just the number of people that died in that, and they didn't even stop the race. I understand the reasons why they decided not to, but plus the driver Pierre Levey.
Is that the one where the car went into the crowd just on the start-finish straight? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. The car essentially disintegrated, flew above the very limited catch fencing, and shred its way through the assembled crowd. And that was what coincidentally took Mercedes out of Formula One and out of any sort of motorsport in '55. they withdrew from that race and then stayed out.
And if you think this was repeated for a number of years, if you think about rallying, even today, you can still get relatively close to the action, and it is dangerous. But when they moved on to Group B, again, when I was very small, the RS200s and all that kind of thing, then obviously the whole series got cancelled because of the danger, not just to the drivers, but to everyone around them. It gets to a point of what is the cost of the entertainment of it? I mean, we get into cars and we pedal them around for fun. We do. Professional drivers do it for fun, for money to an extent, but I think it's not the kind of thing you get into because you want to make money at it. Because as we know, and as something I'd never really appreciated as a kid growing up, it's a hell of a lot of work, a hell of a lot of sacrifice, and a hell of a lot of fundraising to be able to go out there and race in the first place. Unless you're a Formula One driver, the rewards aren't necessarily so massive. I mean, they put a hell of a lot of work in. That's their life. But for drivers in other series, in rally, in touring cars, for example, we know firsthand that these guys, they give it everything. A lot of them work regular jobs, doing regular things to get the money together to be able to get out there and race. And it's something that you really want to do, but there's obviously a risk. Where do you draw the line? And I'm pleased that now things are that much safer, despite the obviously the inherent costs in doing so and the research, and maybe it does make things a little bit more numb in some aspects. But I'd much rather that your heroes are able to come out again next week and you can see them racing.
Right. So when you hear that somebody survived a 33G accident, that's can not really think too greatly about that. You just have no parameters to judge that against. No. But when the human head weighs 33 times what it ordinarily does, then you thank God for hands and devices and halos and anything that protects the driver.
I mean, I have a massive head, so God knows how much that would weigh. If it would be like a wrecking ball flying around. I think that 33G must be roughly what a fly experience is. It hits your windscreen, I should think.
Shall we lighten the mood slightly and talk about sunnier things, or brighter things at least?
Let's
bright
do that.
Yellow things. Lotus Eletre, a bit of a change of pace from Lotus. I mean,
I saw that.
Would Colin Chapman be turning in his grave at the sheer size and the weight of thing? I think yes, he would. To be fair,
yeah.
But let's caveat this with it's Lotus. It's not actually Lotus. It's not Lotus Norfolk, is it? It's Lotus China, Lotus Coventry, Lotus Geely, whoever. But if the money flows down and gets put back into Lotus and it means they can carry on making sports cars, then okay, fair enough, let's allow it. It's quite a nice thing though, isn't it? For one of them, anyway.
It is. Let me first start by saying the only thing that's that big that has a Lotus battery in it previously was a race transporter. However, I do...
No, it is a big old beast, isn't it?
It's massive.
My first thought was that it looked rather like a garishly painted World War II Duke. It's a similar shape at the front, and they're just hideously ugly.
I'll take your word for it. I mean, to me, I actually quite like it. There's a bit of Urus about it, and there's a little bit of Ferrari or whatever it is it's called.
I mean,
Porter sponge.
I mean, we all sit here and sort of quite happily slag off SUVs just due to them not being sporty, racy little things. But I think, any minute now, both of our cars, mine and the wife's car, are going to be SUVs. But I've got an excuse because mine's just a tax dodge, really. If there was a two-seater low-slung sports car alternative in a similar benefit in kind bracket, I'd much rather have one of them. So ignoring the 2% benefit in kind charge, we are going to be a two SUV family any minute now.
They are going to make a 4-door version of this as well, aren't they? So they're starting with the SUV, and we always say, if you're going to have one of them, I think it's quite interesting.
Doors, two each side.
No, I mean like not just an SUV, as in a lower slung version, I believe.
Oh, I see.
Yes, a sedan, a saloon, as we would call it.
But that always confuses me, is what you get. Oh, it's a 5-door hatchback. Well, no, it isn't, is it? Because there's 2 doors each side, so 2 plus 2 it's 4 doors.
Yes.
Yeah, but the boot. Yeah, but it's not a door, it's a boot.
If it has a front, does that make it a 6-door hatchback?
Yeah.
That makes it... I haven't really thought about this
before. If the boot is a door, the bonnet is a door.
It's got to be, isn't it? If it's a luggage space, I'll drive a 6-door hatchback. I didn't see. It's about 5 meters long. That thing. It's huge. I
It's a
didn't
big
see
old
how much
beast,
it costs
isn't
though. Did you?
Well, I watched a video on it, and the guy kept harping on about being affordable and far more affordable, and yes, definitely
Relative
affordable,
term.
and the everyman EV, and yes, far more affordable than a couple of other electric vehicles that Lotus have come out with recently. But it's £100,000.
Is it? That's a lot of
Yes.
money.
I mean, so it's all relative, but it's more affordable.
Yes. Well, all EVs are a lot of money. There are some pretty cool features though. I particularly like, I don't know if you saw this, the self-driving bit, the LiDAR or LiDAR, depending on who you listen to. The sensors, which on all the prototypes, bits and pieces, are always stuck on a roof rack and mounted to the bonnet and look terrible, actually retract into the side of the car, like little pods. So they pop out over the arch when it's in self-driving mode and out of the roof, and then all retracts back in again. And there's something.
Yeah, I saw that. That's quite clever. I quite like that.
There's something either a bit Airwolf or maybe the Knight Rider Super Pursuit mode where all the bits and pieces pop out of it that appeals to my inner 80s child, I think. Late 80s. That's quite cool. There's some really nice features on it, and there's some very nice lines on it as well. The way that the air channels in through the bonnet and up and through the grille. Looking at it though, what I really thought was, if this is going to be your everyday car, it's going to be filthy all of the time, because the air goes through from the wheels and then up across through the doors, basically through the arches at the sides, along the side of the car.
Yeah, that car will have the dirtiest doors of any car known to man,
yes.
won't it?
Yeah. And you imagine the stone chips and things. So you're going to have it PPF to have the paint protection film put on it to begin, because otherwise you're going to drive it down the road. You're going to go through roadworks, which are pretty much every other road at the moment. It's A, going to be covered in tar, and B, going to be covered in chips. And I don't mean the potato kind, I mean full on covered in paint chips. It's going to be a mess before too long. And I'm just imagining now people sticking bits in the grills and things to try and stop that from happening. Because it's all very well and good having something like a Senna and having these bits and pieces open, because it's there for a purpose, that's what you use it for. And I get the reason for having the aero on this EV. It looks cool, granted. But Lotus now seem to have moved more into the aero side of things than anything else, because it's not light, is it? It's whatever it is, however many thousands of tons. They're going to measure it like they do boats shortly, I suspect. And even the sports cars now aren't that light, are they? In terms of, if you think about classically Lotus. So I think their design is being more guided by the aero. So I think it will be their signature very soon. I think all their cars are going to look fantastic because they are such a fluid shape.
You've only got to look at any of the supercars since probably the Ferrari 360, and they've got lower and wider and heavier, and they've had to be more powerful because they're just simply shifting more weight. Whereas the 355 was such a pretty car, still one of my favourite cars, but
It's a pretty car, actually.
the 360 is not. It's just too much of it. You know, it's like one and a half cars that you're moving. So yes, you need a lot more power just to keep the whole ball rolling. Which is, it comes back to what we've been saying in the past about Golf's getting fat and sluggish.
Yes. Well, the Emira, which is obviously a sports car, and you think about the Exige and everything else that's disappeared, the Emira being the new one, I think is 1.4 tonnes, which seems like a lot to me. I mean, I know it's not really a lot in the grand scheme of things when you're talking about SUVs that weigh, what does yours weigh, like 2.2 tonnes or something, Jim?
Yeah,
it's a lot,
two and
isn't
a bit.
it?
I think it's the big battery all-wheel drive, so yeah, just over 2 tons. Which
Yeah, so-
which you don't really feel too much until you want it to change
Corner or
direction
brake,
quickly.
yeah.
It's okay in a very long corner. I mean, it would go well around Goodwood, I reckon, because the corners are very long and very fast. So it would be okay round there, I think. But somewhere a bit tighter and twistier, it's you can definitely feel there's that extra momentum behind it, and it relies a lot more on the electronic trickery to try and keep everything under control.
So the Exige weighs around about a tonne, and if you go for one with a big engine in it, so V6, then they're about 1.1 tonnes. So the Emira's moved on from that to 1.4 already. And I appreciate they've made it more of a GT car, because let's face it, you don't get the fripperies of things like glove boxes, do you, in Lotuses generally, or carpets or anything else like that. I seem to remember them, A, being not massively expensive when I was younger, and B, having things like keep fit windows or what have you, because everything else was heavier. But we do seem to be moving further and further away from it, and I appreciate there's a need for that. And if you are going to use a car more for touring than you are for track, then it kind of makes a lot of sense.
I did see a Lotus Super 7 that was coming up to auction shortly, an original, and it was absolutely ridiculous money they were expecting for it. I think it was in the order of £220,000 because it was an original.
Wow, yeah,
that's a lot.
Was that the one?
But to be fair, you could just buy a brand new one because they're exactly the same.
You could buy a brand new catering.
Yeah,
but the Lotus 7 is not the same.
Well,
they are, though, aren't they?
They're not a million miles away, are they?
They're not a million miles away, but they're not the same. And you know, I mean, this is if you're going to prepare to pay anywhere near that sort of money, then you know, you obviously want something which is rather more authentic than the Caterham is. I'm not knocking the Caterhams.
I don't think I would.
I think they've captured the spirit. But it nevertheless, it's not a Lotus Super 7.
It is. It's basically the same car, isn't it? I mean,
it is though, isn't it?
It kind of is. I mean, I think
it hasn't got a Lotus badge on it.
I don't think it needs
I may be being pedantic
here,
but nevertheless,
right?
Of course, you could change that. You can change anything you want. But
do you remember the Kia Elan, which was basically the Lotus Elan?
I drove a couple.
Yes. It's the same car. This is what this is. The Lotus 7 and the Caterham 7 are the same car. I bet you if you picked off the badge that said
they're exactly the same car.
They're the same size.
They
I bet you could slap it on top. Okay, there's a difference in power plant, but otherwise, I think they're about as pure as you can get. I don't think they are. The shocks are uprated. I can't think of a single other car that hasn't evolved as little as the Caterham from the Lotus.
The Ford Fiesta.
That's gone backwards.
Yes. But actually, it's gone backwards to the stage where now that I hopped in our ST line Vignail, which is the supposed sporty top-of-the-range model, because they now just combine ST sports technologies and Vignail luxury together in one, which I don't quite understand.
And it was a design house anyway, so it doesn't even make sense it being a luxury thing.
No, it doesn't.
It wasn't luxury, it was a design, but anyway.
But I got in it and started it up and went to reverse it. And then A, realised I'd forgotten to put some fuel in it and our fuel station was closed.
That's awkward.
And then B, I realised I couldn't see a thing out of the mirrors because they were folded in. And I looked for the button to unfold them and there was no button to unfold them because they don't fold in on their own.
But that's a chip thing, isn't it? That's a chip thing rather than a cheapskating thing. It's not like plastic door handles.
It's a brand new top-of-the-range Fiesta, and you have to fold the mirrors in and out yourself, which is a bit poor. And our O2 plate hack that we have bought and named Nancy, the mirrors you have to fold in and out on their own. So, for putting the chip shortage aside, I couldn't care less about that for a minute. It's brand new, it's top of the range, and it costs something like £26,000, and the mirrors are exactly the same as a Fiesta that's 20 years old.
It's a lot. Right, I interrupt this broadcast to bring you important news. And it's on Wikipedia, so it must be true. And you can check this for yourself. The modern Caterham 7 is based on the Series 3 Lotus 7, though developed to the point at which no part is the same as the original Lotus.
Well, why did you have to say that?
I stand
to prove Graham right. We've just spent the last 10 minutes going, yeah, but basically you're wrong, and then you've just pooed on our own.
We have just done that.
But possibly, because I'm a little older, I have actually driven both.
Fair enough.
I still maintain that it's basically the same car. In the same way that the original 1959 Mini was the same as the year 2000 Mini. Because actually they weren't the same. And I'm not sure that very many parts from that carried over. Because, let's think, the back panels were all different. The side panels are different because of the way that the hinges and everything are. The front panel was different as well because of the way the grille was. Updates in the subframe and the suspension. Although you might have still had an A series, then you had a single point injection and a multi-point injection. Yeah, this I could go on, and this would be very boring for everybody, except for maybe people that are as geeky as I am about minis and things. And where's Dave when you need him? Anyway, Dave likes going into the detail, and I appreciate that because he is my kind of man. But the point is, the very original Mini, the 1959 Mini, it was not really the same as the 2001 Mini, in the same way that the original Lotus 7 is not the same as the Caterham 7. To my mind, they are basically the same thing, even though they're not the same in pretty much any regard. And I'm trying to think what bits did carry over from the very original ones. I'm sure someone will tweet us and tell us, or message us or whatever. We are at UK Motor Talk everywhere. Tell me which bits are carried over from the very original Mini to the very end of the line, which was about 2001. Because I very nearly bought one. One of the last 50, in fact, and was explicitly forbade doing so by my mother, which is a big mistake because it would be worth a lot of money now, and I would have loved it.
Was it just for the simple fact that she didn't want you to crash in it? Because the crumple zone in the front of a Mini is your right ankle, isn't it?
That's right.
That's what goes first and absorbs the impact from the engine.
And due to the unique way in which the steering and everything else is in the Mini, when it does squash up, of course, the steering wheel sort of rotates like it's almost. People say it's bus-like, but it's kind of like holding a pizza in front of you. So that sort of then just slowly squashes into your squishy bits at your midsection. So it would be uncomfortable to crash in, and yes, she was quite worried that I would do that, but it would have been a fantastic thing. It was beautiful. It was blue with a silver roof, silver mirrors, had a little plaque inside the glove box telling you what number it was. I forget which number. And I can't remember if it was... I was tempted to say it was a 51 plate, but it couldn't have been. Anyway, I'm disappearing off the middle. It was about $7 and a bit grand back then. And I suppose on daydreams of classic Minis, which, let's face it, I probably won't ever be able to afford now, and if you did, you wouldn't be able to use it because you'd be constantly guilty about it getting wet and then falling apart. I guess it's probably time to end. So on that note, from me, it's goodbye.
And from me, it's goodbye.
And from me too, it's goodbye. Take care.
UK Motor Talk, a First Take Media production.
Follow your dreams.